Welcome back, everybody. Matt and Rachel here with our first panel discussion with a really wonderful, distinguished panel who's going to be talking all about robotic farming. So a quick introduction. We're actually going to be handing this over to one of the panelists to moderate. But some quick introductions. On the panel, we've got Phil Boyer, who's a principal at CrossLink Capital. Phil joined CrossLink in 2014 and focuses on early stage investments in enterprise software, so cloud, data, developer tools, SaaS, and frontier technology. He's got a BA in economics from the University of Pennsylvania.
Igino Cafiero is the CEO and founder of Bear Flag Robotics. He's an entrepreneur with expertise in software, hardware, and product development. He's founded 2 startups and worked at 2 others. He has an MBA from Wharton, an MS in electrical engineering from Stanford, and a BA from Carnegie Mellon.
And Brandon Alexander is the CEO and co-founder of Ironox, former software engineer at Google, and started Alexander Mobile, building apps in the early days of the iPhone App Store. And he has a BS in computer science from the University of Texas, Austin. These guys can give you more of their background if they want to, but we're excited to have them talk about a great topic, robotic farming. And we'll turn it over to Phil, and we'll go dark and come back for questions at the end.
Cool. All right. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. Excited to be here and kick it off for the first ever virtual conference on AgTech, I think. I'm pretty sure I could say that. Yeah, it's great to be here with these 2 guests. I'm a big fan of both gentlemen here, Igino and Brandon. So I'll start just very quickly on kind of my background and my firm CrossLink, and then we'll kind of jump into to the guest here. So CrossLink, if you guys don't know us, we're a early stage venture firm based here in San Francisco, where I'm sitting right now. We have been around for about 30 years. We are investing in a wide variety of different sectors within technology, but all very early stage focused. So we typically like to get in at seed and Series A with the goal of staying with the company kind of throughout the life of the company and hopefully all the way through exit. So our in terms of interest, my interest, as was mentioned, I've done a lot kind of in enterprise software as well as frontier technology. So when I say that, that's a pretty broad term, but I'm including things like robotics, hardware companies, IoT, and a variety of other things. And I've also done quite a bit kind of on the data application side, including a lot of AI and machine learning. So within agriculture technology, we've made a few investments at CrossLink. Our first was a company that's actually going to be presenting tomorrow in this conference, Descartes Labs. It's a AI company that takes geospatial data sets and runs all kinds of interesting deep learning algorithms on top of that for doing things such as predicting the supply of corn on a global basis, on a daily basis globally. Very interesting company. Mark will tell you a lot more about what they're doing. And we've also done, we invested in a company called Hungry Root, which is kind of disrupting traditional distribution of food. They're a direct-to-consumer brand that sells healthy foods that can be prepared within minutes. And then we're working on a new investment that I can't talk about yet, but it's also an interesting space within agriculture. So very fired up about the category. Obviously, the size of the market's massive. A lot of different elements of it haven't been innovated in years and years. So excited to invest in next generation of technology, to create new awesome businesses in the category. So with that, I'll turn it over. I wanted to let these 2 kind gentlemen give their own introduction on what they're doing, but both very relevant businesses to the topic at hand. We have a robotic tractor company on my left here, and then a full stack autonomous run farming company, indoor farming company on my right, and Brandon. But I'll kick it off. Maybe Igino, you want to start with your background?
For sure. Thanks, Phil. Awesome to be here. This is really cool to share with everyone. That like Phil said, I'm Igino Cafiero. I'm one of the founders of Bear Flag Robotics, and sort of the one-liner about what we do is we build autonomous technology for farm tractors. So the model the model we use is we procure the machines from the OEMs. So, think John Deere, CNH, Mahindra, et cetera, bring them into our shop, put the sensors, actuators, and compute onto these machines, and then lease them to growers for a compelling ROI. I mean, the idea is that every month that you farm with Bearflag is a month that you reduce your operational expense. That being said, when I say lease, that one word sort of belies like a much more thoughtful and intricate go-to-market, where we have a strong thesis internally that autonomous looks like a service long before it's a product in agriculture, and so we're building the short to medium term strategy of our company around that, recognizing that we can provide more value to growers by providing farming as a service through autonomous to them as they get more comfortable and as the technology matures, which will likely be a relevant topic for the next 45 minutes.
Cool.
Great.
Brandon?
I'll go next. Yeah. So I'm Brandon Alexander. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ironox. And our one-liner is we are building a fully autonomous greenhouse. So the idea is that we can set up these robotic greenhouses near cities all over to supply super fresh local produce for everybody. And just a little bit quick background on that, most fresh produce right now is pretty much coming from California in the United States and travels about 2,000 miles for about a week. And we want to solve that with these robotic greenhouses.
Awesome. Great. So the first question I wanted to kick off with is kind of more of a broader industry question. I mean, how would you guys define, and whoever wants to start, go for it. But how would you guys define, the status of robotics automation in agriculture today? Like what inning do you think we're in kind of this transformation?
I'll start with saying, I'd say up and coming. That, I mean, it's a little bit different too. Like Igino and I kind of are in different areas. So I think that's probably the most important part. And we'll talk about this plenty, I'm sure. But agriculture is a massive market and extremely diverse in terms of outdoor, broadacre crops, orchards, indoor. And each one of them has very special technology requirements and operations processes. So, as we're getting to self-guided tractors, that's still, let's say, early days, but now you can it's starting to work, actually work in the real world. And then I think we're just now starting to see things where you get into things like plant manipulation, which is a big focus for us for how do you actually handle plants on an individual basis and not just giant combines that you currently see in the corn and the soybean industry. I would say third inning, if I had to pick an inning in baseball.
Okay. Do you know any comments on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with Brandon. I will add some color though, not to do a disservice to ag equipment that's existed so far, and sort of like Brandon said, like we need to chunk this out and like what part of AgTech are we even talking about, right? More specifically in robotics, and then precisely like when you even look at like what is an autonomous tractor? Like tractors do hundreds of tasks, on a farm and in adjacent to the farm. Like what exactly what tasks are we adding automation to, for example? So like when you break it down, like what inning are we in sort of which sector of farming? And if you ask the guys at like Trimble or Ag Junction or Deere, like they've been working on guided technologies for the last 20 years. Those are massively successful and have huge adoption rates and very mature technologies. But if you look at sort of the incorporation of new types of sensors and higher levels of compute to use the signal coming off those sensors, so technologies like LiDAR, radar, or different types of cameras for object detection. Like, yeah, we're still in batting practice for those sorts of things. For in robotics, there's some really compelling demos, but just the chasm between a compelling demo and something that farmers are actually using day in, day out and leaning on for their operations, like that's a big chasm to cross, and certainly we're working hard on that, and it can't be underestimated.
Yeah, so that actually kind of leads me in another question, which is, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of big companies that have innovated throughout the years when it comes to John Deere and others in kind of the the equipment landscape. But what is it about what's happening right now that makes it different now? I mean, what you guys obviously both bet your entire careers on, the next generation of this space. So I would think you'd have some pretty good, strong conviction on something being different as to right now, and why it's time to kind of disrupt some of these older incumbents in this space. And so how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I can start on this one. So I guess some quick background myself. I was at a robotics company called Willow Garage. And then before this, I was at Google X doing robotics there. And even just like the past 5 years, we have seen just a tremendous breakthrough in, I'd say, a lot of core technologies, the way we do computer vision, to cheaper sensors, to just available computing power now, especially with cloud computing and so on, that I think a lot of things that were only possible in a lab 5 years ago, we're finally getting to the point where they're available in the real world. But I think a big part of this, though, is especially in agriculture, which is a high volume industry and a pretty dynamic environment. It has to work, and it has to work incredibly well day in and day out. Like if you have a 1 week harvest cycle or harvest window for it, if your machine goes down, you could lose your entire field. And so there's very little tolerance for failure. And I think it's one of the reasons that, compared to a lot of other industries, that we're just now starting to really see applications of autonomy.
Yeah. The only other thing I'd add to that, not only is it this sort of perfect storm of sensor prices coming down, research really coming down the pipe, but also the labor problem. And I can't believe we've gotten 12 minutes into this conversation without mentioning labor, but that really is the driving force of the customers who we talk to. And so really, from our perspective, once we've narrowed this down to exactly what we're doing and how we're providing the service to growers, it becomes an execution problem. How can we get reliable autonomous machines in the hands of these growers as quickly as possible? Because the demand is there. I mean, people are asking for it. We go down to Salinas, multiple times a week, and we stand in equipment yards with people and we explain them what we're trying to do and the vision of Bear Flag, and they're on board. And how soon can we have this? This will transform how we do operations. And so this pull for an alternative to expensive labor, which is getting more and more expensive and more scarce, is really what's driving it, at least in our perspective, talking to our customers.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually going to be one of my next questions, which is about this labor shortage issue. We've seen a lot of headlines about this, and we've heard average age of a farmer at 58, I think it is, and all this crazy stuff. I mean, is this overhyped, or are you guys actually seeing the real true effects of this in market? And I'm sure, Igino, you talk to a lot of these farmers and kind of hear directly from them. Is this something that is actually top of mind, or is this kind of just more kind of some creative journalism?
No, I'll jump in here. This is top of mind, and whereas it may not have been 7 or 8 or 10 years ago, now it is. And even in the short life of our company so far, the conversation's changed. We go to these AgTech panels, all over California, and the most important part of entrepreneurship is getting to know your users. And you see those older guys who've been farming their whole lives, for many decades. And we're skeptical of new technology 10 years ago, but see the writing on the wall, see how the economics of their operation don't work with this rising cost of labor. And they're getting out to these AgTech panels to learn about how technology can help their operation. And those are really fun, cool conversations.
Yeah, I would say it's the single biggest pain point from every farmer we talk with, of just finding good labor. A lot of this work is highly seasonal too, and often involves migrating to different towns and valleys. But just keeping good labor was the top pain point for every farmer we talked with. On the other side of that, though, I think in some ways that's a good thing. A lot of the work, say down in Salinas and Central Valley and other places, it's very manual. It's very much just bending over backwards, backbreaking work that for harvesting lettuce or strawberries or whatever it may be. And I think the plus side of this is that there's other options now with better opportunities that aren't just having to do this packaging work. And I also think it's worth pointing out that while we're talking about the United States, which is having a severe labor crisis in agriculture, I've seen reports for Mexico, for China, for other markets globally that essentially newer generations across the globe aren't taking up agriculture like they used to.
Mm-hmm. What about, I mean, so that brings to kind of the other side of the coin. Yeah, I mean, thinking about, you know, from the farmer perspective, they're seeing all these interesting technologies coming to bear, and you guys kind of addressing them and trying to sell to them. How do they respond to this? I mean, is this something where they view you guys as, you know, a threat to their existing status quo business and that they've built for years and years and years, or is it something where they're actually starting to embrace some of the technology innovations to make their lives better and easier?
Yeah, I think both. There's one of the my observation is there is a lot of arrogance coming from Silicon Valley, saying, "Hey, listen, like, yeah, you've been doing this for many generations, and you think you know what you're doing, but like, hey, like, you know, in Silicon Valley, like, we can solve all your problems." And I think that's fundamentally flawed, and it does a massive disservice to everyone looking at this problem. But when you do approach from a cooperative perspective, saying, "Hey, listen, like, food production is important to all of us, and your success is directly tied to my success as a person living on this planet. Let's work together to solve this problem." People lean in. There's no question, and it's just basic human common sense. Like, let's learn as much as we can about this problem and solve it together.
Yeah, well said. And I think it's also worth pointing out that we're talking like self-guided tractors, manipulation, things like that today, but like agriculture has been introducing new technology for, well, since the beginning, but especially over the past 50, 60 years. Things like artificial fertilizers, to GMOs, to the tractors, to combines, to sprayers, that I think the reason we've been able to sustain population growth and continue to do that with less labor already is because a lot of technology to date. But I do think it's going to require robotics, machine learning to kind of get that next leap.
Yeah, what do you guys think are the most tangible problems that robotics can actually solve in farming and in agriculture? I mean, are there low-hanging fruit, to use the pun terribly, that you guys see out there that are just, you know, must-dos first?
Yeah, happy to lend my perspective. I mean, we're pretty public about it. The tasks that we're aiming for first are mowing, spraying, and tillage. These are things that happen year-round in Salinas. If you look at, you know, a vineyard, for example, growing grapes, they're doing 30 passes a year on those grapes. And if you're familiar with vineyards, like, these are very narrow rows, and having a larger tractor doesn't help you at all, because you still need to get between these rows, and so it just becomes this massive time-consuming labor problem. And to Brandon's point, like, these are hazardous jobs. These you know, the nicer operations have climate-controlled cabs to avoid inhaling the chemicals as they're being applied directly to the vines. But alternatively, folks are wearing hazmat suits and respirators, and it's a tough day outside of how expensive the day is for the grower. And so one of our main objectives is getting folks out of those jobs and into places where they can be more productive around the farm, like fixing irrigation or attending to diseased crops, or even, you know, maintaining the tractors themselves. Like, these are jobs that robots are nowhere near being able to help. So let's use robotics and you know, new technology to help do the more basic stuff on the farm, and then freeing up these other folks to be more productive on other areas of the farm.
I'm biased, just to be very clear. Like, we are running. Our goal is like end-to-end automation for produce. So we have like a multi-robot system. We have a robotic arm. We have a giant mobile robot named Angus, an automated dosing machine. But of that, I think it's, in terms of robotics, one of the earlier things that we looked at was what's called phenotyping, which is basically scanning produce and kind of analyzing it to see how it's doing. Mm-hmm. And I would consider this relatively low hanging in terms of it's a really good engineering problem. But I think it's also a case that we talked to a lot of farmers about that. And one of the best quotes I heard from a farmer was, "Look, I don't need more data, I need actionable data." And what their point was is that they don't have the infrastructure. So if you told them that this square meter is nitrogen deficient, they're like, "Great, thanks, but I have a 5-acre fertigation plot. What is this going to do for me?" And so I think it's what is both the lowest hanging fruit, but also what is the most applicable to solving real problems.
Got it. All right, so I'm going to switch away from the industry questions and talk a little bit more about kind of startups in the space, including your guys' companies, but also just kind of more broadly, and how you build a company in this space as a young early stage company. First off, I wanted to ask, outside of your own company, what do you think is what is the most interesting thing you've seen out there in ag robotics in terms of technology? Could be from incumbents or startups, but besides your own company, what do you see out there that's just super compelling and interesting?
I'll start. Bear flag is great, legitimately. Yeah, we've been talking about trying to do others in terms of like self-guided tractors, but the reality is there's a lot of existing infrastructure out there, and I think it's an incredibly complex problem that is now, I would say, self-driving tractors is actually so much harder than cars, at least in terms of like the terrain that you're working with, the variability, mud, rodents. But I think it's going to have a substantial impact on outdoor agriculture, for sure. The others I would put would be like anything like satellite imagery, sort of like drones maybe, but I think like satellites is a good way to get like 1,000-acre plus type inputs.
Yeah. Brandon's stole my thunder. I was going to talk about iron ox. No, on a very broad level, anyone using end effectors to actually touch fruit or touch the crop themselves, like that is a massively difficult problem indoors or outdoors. And unlocking that will unlock so much. Phil and I had a conversation about this a couple months ago. The impact of helping the harvest labor automation will be tremendous. Anyone that's able to do that across multiple types of crops is going to just move the industry forward so much.
Yeah, and are there companies out there that are seeing from a robotics perspective specifically are seeing real traction that you've noticed, where beyond kind of just the initial interest in the space and maybe starting to kind of pilot or test out, are there success cases out there that you guys have seen of these things actually being adopted at a reasonable scale, within the farms?
Yeah, I mean, I'll refrain from like naming names, but the actual, like, anyone solving a real problem, and let's like real problems are like water, food traceability, labor, like these are like core things. Growers are engaging with them, and so I was talking to these guys, before we came online, like we were just at an AgTech conference yesterday, and the guys getting the most attention are the ones solving like those core problems. You see it again and again. And I go out and visit growers, and anyone interested in Bear Flag is also interested in all these other in-field robots. Folks that are helping them, with I'm sounding like a broken record, with these core problems that they have. And if you can go and like solve the labor problem, but also do some work with food traceability or analytics there, like that's like a two-way win, and that's not to take us off topic, but that really is where Bear Flag is trying to go.
Yeah, and I'd say, I mean, like I said earlier, like we're relatively early days. It's a massive market, is I think another big part of that, and fairly distributed as well. And but what's interesting is I would say farmers are actually quite tech savvy. A lot of the ones we've talked with, but they're risk averse by the nature of having to be. So usually once something like they see it or the neighbor has it and it's working, then I've noticed kind of like a domino effect with it. But the other problem, now you can find that, is when I think someone starts getting traction is usually when someone may sweep in. Like like I say, Blue River a couple of years ago with the John Deere acquisition.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have to get in, or it could be existential.
Yeah. What are the biggest challenges in selling into this space? Because I mean, I would think, being like we were mentioning before, kind of an earlier stage, company, especially from Silicon Valley, where maybe you don't speak the same language necessarily as the customer, or maybe initially, maybe you learn to eventually. But what's the biggest challenge in kind of breaking, getting in the door, and then in these sales conversations where it's the technology is changing the way that they do things, and it's they've been doing generally the same processes for hundreds of years. Like, how do you come in and actually introduce a fundamentally new approach, and break down the barriers here?
I'll start because I think Brandon has a better answer. So I'll give my answer first, because Brandon takes ours to the extreme. It's very easy to have a conversation with the owner. Like I said, like if you're talking about labor, like the guy will pick up the phone, the guy or girl will pick up the phone and talk to you. Like that's not a problem. And so for us, really, like the innovation, we talk about Bear Flag, like we have two core challenges in our company. One is building reliable, safe, autonomous machines that will do field work, and the other is go to market. And removing the obstacles, all the ones you just talked about how can we integrate into a grower's existing operation? How can we make the ROI immediately apparent to them? How can they be most comfortable taking the smallest amount of risk to allow Bear Flag to help them? This all sort of comes together with our model of farming as a service, saying like, listen, like I know what your costs are to do X operation per acre. We can come in and we can undercut that or do it less because of this technology advantage. Are you open to letting us, till a certain amount of acres or spray a certain number of acres of your operation, of your field? And the answer is usually yes, because it's such a low risk for them. They're like, yeah, like the worst thing that happens is I have to go back and redo this, but imagine the possibilities if it's successful, rather than coming in and saying like, hey, listen, like you're gonna buy this, trust me, I'll pencil out in 7 years, and I can personally assure you we'll be here to support it. Like that's going to be a much harder conversation. Whereas if we just come in and provide the service itself, it's much less friction.
And we sell produce, so we are a farm. In fact, as of a few weeks ago, I'm happy to announce that we are now selling produce in stores. So if you're in San Carlos, definitely check it out in California. It's delicious. But I mean, the way, thank you, my pitch being done, one of the reasons we chose that, because that was actually not our original idea. We thought we were going to sell actually outdoor and to farmers. And what we realized is, like, for us, one of the things that we really cared about most is, like, we want to feed people. Like, that's why we truly are most excited about. And one of the things we noticed in our analysis is that, especially in the fresh produce industry, it's still very manual. It has not seen near the level of automation that like corn or soybeans have. And so, and a lot of it's just because it requires these like a lot of delicacy. If you mess up a tomato, you get tomato juice or ketchup. And that's where we really see that we can have the biggest impact with our technology. But also at the same time, it's such a big part of it that we're like, well, let's just do it and grow produce and sell it. Ideally at a great price point with better quality.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Brandon. So, so you guys, you have some really interesting robotics technology that kind of powers your whole growing process from beginning to end. At some point early on, did you ever consider selling the technology directly to farmers, whether it be indoor or outdoor, as opposed to kind of owning the whole process yourself as you do it today? And if so, like what kind of made you go the other route and actually just sell produce directly?
Because actually our original business model was, let's go sell the robots. Mm-hmm. And particularly we were thinking like, would you sell one or two of our robots? But one of the things we realized is like for our approach to work, which is like a full stack approach, it's really the whole system. It's everything from the hydroponics to robotic arm to Ingus, our 1,000-pound mobile robot, all working together, including the design of the actual interior of the greenhouse. And for us, what we realized is that we could go talk to every single farmer, try to retrofit their existing greenhouses to meet our needs. But then we realized it's a lot of bespoke, long lead cycle operations. And I think this is one difference like indoor versus like an outdoor, where relatively standard row widths to some extent outdoor that can make it easier for them. That's one of the big reasons that at the end of the day, this is a commodity market. Like I think that our place is a little better, but it's a large commodity market for across the world. And if we can do this cheaper and more efficiently, I don't see any reason from a scaling perspective at speed to not just to do it.
And Igino, so when you kind of originally formulated the idea for the company and the technology, has your outlook changed in terms of, you know, the best way to actually insert this into the market? Meaning, like, was it, you know, initially something where you were thinking, you know, maybe you offer the entire complete product and then maybe you switch to a more retrofit solution, which I think maybe you guys are doing somewhat today, or, you know, how do you think about that whole thing about reducing the frictions to kind of adoption?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of incorrect hypotheses were made early on, which were happily disproven. We originally thought we would sell a kit that we could mail to growers and they could install on any tractor. And there's a lot of reasons that's probably not the best approach for the reasons I just mentioned. Now, being a service provider, God, I hate myself when I say these things, but sort of like, you know, the Uber of farming or whatever, right? Where you think of your mobility needs and how they're served, and you know, whether I hire the labor, purchase the assets, buy the insurance, be OSHA compliant, figure out the logistics, figure out the timetables, deal with truancy and absenteeism, or just call up a company like Bear Flag to come and do this service for me at lower cost, plus all the other insights and analytics that same company can do for me. Like, that's a much more compelling offering. And by the way, too, I don't need to learn how to use this new technology. I don't need to troubleshoot it. I don't need to worry about my relationship with the dealership to come out and fix it. Like, all those things go away pretty quickly. And then, I mean, from a business perspective, the upside that gives us to be able to help these growers is tremendous as well. We can increase the duty cycle of equipment so much better. We can provide insights to how crops are grown. Like, all sorts of good things happen when you switch to this model.
And I guess the you know, another question related to that is just, you know, there's incumbents out there in the market that are probably eager and willing to partner with early stage startups like yourselves. I mean, on the equipment side for Igino, and then more on the distribution side probably for Brandon. How do you guys think about partnering with, you know, some of the larger companies in this space? And are there particular types of companies that are more open to working with startups as a way to kind of, you know, propel you into the market? Or do you feel like you know, that's just a lost cause, you kind of need to go direct?
Me? Okay. Once again, so a different customer base here, so it's probably a slightly different answer. But one of the things, like, our customers would be retail, so grocery stores, and food services, is the restaurant groups. And what we have noticed is, especially the past few months, that their biggest pain points are consistency in terms of availability. It's a big issue in fresh produce. You often have to source from multiple locations, multiple farms, importing from different countries to maintain a consistent supply, because that's what consumers expect. And we have been like, oh, we could white label or do something like that, but it hasn't been for us as much of more of a partnership. Would be they actually want our messaging to come through, which has been a big surprise the past few months. Instead of just being kind of a one-sided, like a white label type operation, they like that there's something unique about this, and for them it helps actually drive sales. And so we haven't quite had the same level. Now I'm talking about on the demand side. On the farm side, we're avoiding those conversations right now.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, for us, like, inherently our business model today is to is to work on top of existing equipment. So inherently, we need relationships with OEMs. The level of technical partnership is something that we discussed quite a bit. Some OEMs have been very forward, very open to working with us on a deep technical level to interface with machines. Others have been more hesitant. Truly, like the things I worry about is how can we keep moving quickly? How can we unblock ourselves? How can we be a company that stands up on our own and delivers utility to growers? If the answer to any of those questions unlocks, more utility to growers, yeah, we're all about it.
Yeah. So someone on the message board asked a question about, are there particular, and this is more for Igino and selling to farms, but are there particular sizes of farms, like individual farmers versus the conglomerates that are, better customers? And actually, as a related point, are there certain parts geographically of the world that are maybe, more eager to adopt these kinds of things as opposed to others?
Yeah, let me answer the caveat. There's exceptions everywhere, and you can't make a sweeping statement that this is better than that, because agriculture is so complicated and unique in every individual crop. That being said, large operations in Salinas are really good for us. They have a ton of horsepower per acre. There's an entire staff of machine operators. This labor problem is one of the nails in their head, and we can really help them there. So talking about tillage in Salinas, or spraying in orchards in Central California, or disking and spraying in vineyards up and down the West Coast. These are really machine intense operations that require a lot of logistics and staff to make them run. Those are really killer use cases for us.
Got it. And Brandon, on the geography question, what are there particular parts of the world that you think are most interesting for your model? Obviously it's pretty interesting being able to provide fresh produce to different parts of the world that maybe don't have as much access. But how are you thinking about where it's most interesting to kind of place your facilities over the long haul, and where the kind of most interesting opportunities for Inox are?
Yeah, a good question. For us, different regions we notice have different sets of pain points. Freshness produce is pretty centralized no matter kind of where you are. You're maybe Spain, here maybe United States, California. And so that's a pretty global issue. But we've also noticed, in the United States, it's extremely expensive to grow indoors. Labor is very high. It's a lot of touch points, not really the same level of automation. That would be one of our big value adds, in addition to just a good fresh product. But then what we've also heard from in other countries, that sometimes there's just the food safety side can be a big part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the soil conditions, it could be manure runoff, things like that can actually contaminate it. So certain places you have to cook the produce or cook before you eat it. To others, there's a bit of a yearning to understand where your food comes from, what chemicals were applied, just an overall movement towards transparency. And the reality is, a lot of farms either can't really supply that, either because they don't want to, or just they don't have the infrastructure to do so. So a big part of our just kind of side effect, but one that we really embrace, is transparency, traceability in everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
Every touch point to the end consumer.
Yeah, it seems like is it getting worse in terms of food safety? With the outbreaks we had this year, I don't know if it's just because people are becoming more aware of these things or what, but I don't know. Is food safety getting worse, or are we just becoming more aware of it?
Yeah. It's definitely been happening a lot lately. We saw the romaine scare in 2018. That romaine is $1 billion plus market, and this essentially overnight was wiped out in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Coli scare at Chipotle a few years ago lost them multiple billions of dollars in market cap. It's a legitimate issue that, because it's so centralized, particularly it may just be the Selena season or maybe a Yuma, Arizona season. If, let's say, a processing plant or something that's contaminated, it's not just one field, it could be about millions of heads could be contaminated in that process. So I'd say that's something that's kind of the downside of such a centralized operation. Now, definitely a shout out to the industry in terms of, like, there are really good food safety practices. There's food safety audits and processes to follow. And like, if people are following them, like, they do eliminate a lot. And I think it's come a long ways in the past 50 years. It's just that they have to be followed and held to that standard. You cannot slack off.
Yeah. Not to be too tangential, but also there's a lot of scrutiny coming under input providers. And I think robotics, just a quick word, we can help reduce the amount of inputs and potentially reduce the negative impact of not only the food we eat, but the environment too, with more selective use of these inputs.
I also say that we notice from customers now a lot more than even a few years ago, an emphasis on the food safety side. So what was like maybe like a bullet point, we notice is now more of a conversation that the customers are bringing up, that they're wanting to see traceability, they're wanting to understand what we're doing around food safety. We're just going to do a voluntary third-party food safety audit. Like, they're valuing that a lot higher, and I think it's great. It's great for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. All right, so I guess in terms of one question someone wrote on the board was just talking about where each of you guys are in your stage of development of technology and product, and what your go-to-market plans are. I don't know if you want to kind of dig in. We're kind of getting in the weeds there a little bit, but you guys, whatever you're willing to share in terms of where you guys are at with your business, and then kind of what your next plans are from a go-to-market perspective to get it out there.
Yeah, I'll go first quickly. Like, so we're a seed stage company looking to raise Series A. It seems like what the investment community really wants to see is product market fit. The growers are adopting this technology, and in order to do that, we need to develop the technology that we will provide, but then also go out, prove out the early days of the go-to-market. So this looks like revenue, certainly not in scalable quantities or in quantities of scale, but showing that we're on the right track here, and with more funds, our company can really start to change how growers are thinking about their operations. So really focusing on being thoughtful about how to get those first dollars in the most meaningful way to answer as many questions, discover as many unknowns as we can in these early days.
Brandon?
Yeah, can you read the question?
Oh, no, just where you guys are at currently with product and technology, and then your go-to-market plans going forward.
Yeah, I guess I'm a quick background. So I think it is worth, especially some of the audience here, is our first couple of years is pretty hardcore R&D. There's developing just a lot of the core technology, and then like one of the things with new technology is there's the development of it, and there's like the hardening of it, making it robust, actually production ready. So for us, the first year is pure R&D. Last year, 2018 was really focused on just getting us at a reliability state, a production level that we could actually use to grow produce every day. And then with that, that's really the focus of 2019 so far is on go-to-market, reaching out to restaurants, retail, and so on. And as I already mentioned, like now in stores, now at restaurants, and continue to expand from there.
Right. Cool. And if you guys have...
I think Phil dropped off there.
All right, Igino, how's it going?
Good, man. Yeah. 10,
the next question. Yeah.
10:15, he's done. Hey, Brandon, there's one for you. Ironox, what is your plan on land acquisition to expand? Rent land for farms to add and operate your own robotic greenhouses, or new acquisition greenfield applications?
That's a good question. So for us, right now we operate the entire greenhouse. We are working on our next greenhouse actually as we speak, and just continue to scale cities all over. In terms of actually efficiently doing that, one of the nice things is this greenhouse has, we see a lot of potential like ways we can partner, whether it's with landholders and so on, to do that more efficiently.
Cool. You guys can handle this without me. You truly are autonomous company. Awesome. Well, I think we're about out of time here, but I mean, the only other thing, I mean, what are you guys most optimistic about for the future of food and ag, and what are you most pessimistic about?
I'll go quickly. Yeah. I'm really optimistic about the demand. We see it every day. My inbox was 3 growers in it this morning who want to talk. Really optimistic about demand. I want to caution and hedge expectations. Like, this is a long road. There's no hockey sticks in ag. We're in it for the long haul. We'll be here. Our vision is to see unmanned ag equipment all over the world, and we'll be there. But it might not be tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, I'm most optimistic on like, this actually happening now. I think what made it in the lab 5, probably 10 years ago for sure. And now we're actually going to start seeing a lot more of this, a lot more activity. And at the end of the day, the consumer wins. Like, it's just a better way of doing it. Most pessimistic on, I think, separating hype from reality as we get into like any broader industry. That agriculture is not easy. It's not an easy market. There's a lot of variability and a lot of just challenges with it. So I wouldn't say for the faint of heart, but it's also a massive market that I think is going to be very rewarding.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys. This has been fun. And thanks to everyone for having us from Tuck. And thanks, Jim, for inviting me.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.